thank you everyone for joining us for the 4 p.m. session on the last day. Here to talk about the Northern Lights, the Nordic region. They've obviously chosen an Australian to moderate this panel, makes a lot of sense. I'm just going to introduce myself and then introduce you to my panellists. So I'm so happy to be up here beside, obviously my name is Chloe James, I'm the Media Director for RFI Group. We're a global business intelligence and digital media provider focusing exclusively on financial services. So we're a market and consumer research firm for the banking and financial services community. We talk to 500,000 consumers every year about their relationship with their banking products and feed that information back to the banks in syndicated research councils. So that's sort of my background. I'm also a presenter for Sky News, and I talk to entrepreneurs and successful business owners about what it takes to create a successful business. And I travel around the world doing this, so not such a tough life. I'm going to start by introducing my panellists and actually asking them to introduce themselves. People always introduce themselves so much better than anybody else can. So I'm going to start actually with Lisa down the end and come back this way. So Lisa, do you want to kick off?
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. My name is Lisa Enckell. I am originally from Sweden, and I now actually live here in Singapore. So I was in Sweden. I worked for startups there. That brought me over to San Francisco in the US, where I worked for a couple of years working for that startup. And then when we actually closed down the US office, I can maybe come back to that one later, my partner and I decided to explore the world. So we left the US and we moved here to Southeast Asia, and we kind of decided around like 6-8 months ago to actually stay here in Singapore for a long time. So now we're based here. We no longer travel around, but we've been to Jakarta, Berlin, and a few other places in between. So since I left the company I worked for in San Francisco called Wrap, I've been consulting for primarily startups, but also some investors. So now I'm the interim CMO for a FinTech company in Stockholm called YouPool, that's Young Urban People. And I'm also interim CMO for a startup in Mumbai. So I'm dividing my time between Mumbai and Singapore.
Wow, it's going to be fantastic to have your sort of insight to this market and how sort of your backgrounds relate to Asia. So that's great. Lisa, Thomas?
Yeah, so my name is Thomas Krogh, and I'm CEO of Copenhagen FinTech. As you can hear, it's been a rough conference, so my voice is a little bit. I sound like Joe Cocker, I think. Yeah. So we are a non-for-profit organization, and we organize basically the Danish fintech ecosystem. So what we do is three things. We engage with all the universities and run an innovation network where we fund research into fintech. We run an incubator and a co-working space right now with more than 50 companies sitting there. The whole ecosystem in Denmark is around 150, 160 fintech startups. Then we help companies scale and attract investments and talent to Denmark also. And that's why we're here. So we brought a delegation of, I think we're around 25, 30 people, 10 startups here. We did a MOU together with Singapore FinTech Association last year. In May, sorry. And then afterwards, the Danish FSA did a collaboration agreement with the Singaporean MA. So we're very happy to be here. It's an amazing conference. It's really been good for us. We're really happy.
Fantastic. It's great to have you here. I spent some time in Copenhagen at Money 2020 in the middle of the year and had a wonderful experience there, and obviously really saw that sort of innovative culture, which we'll talk about on the panel. Irene?
Yes, hi everyone. Thank you for inviting us. I'm an entrepreneur from Norway, born and raised in the financial community, and I'm a CEO that live and breathe the vision to build a strong Nordic collaboration culture. And together with Chris Skinner, as someone probably knows here, we established NFI, a Nordic executive network. And we're working for executive within banking and finance, telecom, retail, and media. And our ambitious goal is to build a strong collaboration culture and become the common arena for collaboration and co-creation across industries and borders in the Nordics. And we also have some example of what we do. We usually now work to assign key issues to be solved in the Nordics when it comes to achieve interoperability between the wallets. We are doing hackathons. We have an NFI entrepreneurship that visited Singapore in April, and they I was so proud of being, learning so much. Then we had to go home and sign an agreement with Aleksi 80, whom we invited here. And we are also opening a Nordic pavilion in Oslo, that we are inviting international companies and building bridges towards especially Asia.
Fantastic. And I mean, I think we're going to have some good chats about partnerships while we're on the panel today, so that'd be good. And a friend of Chris Skinner, a good friend of mine. So, Aleksi, would you like to finish up?
Yes. So, hello. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Aleksi Grym. I'm head of digitalization at the Bank of Finland, which is a central bank. And my job is really very simple. I'm trying to make sense of the digital revolution taking place in the financial industry. So, piece of cake. So I look at all sorts of topics like FinTech, new players, new technologies, digital currencies, all of the nice words and the nice hype words. Longer term, I'm trying to understand how the financial industry is changing, how financial intermediation works in the future, and what the role of a central bank is there. So there's also the component of digital transformation for a central bank as well.
Fantastic. I'm actually going to kick off then with you, Aleksi, because you're closest to me, and I'll keep you on a roll there. But I'd love to ask the panel's view, and I think most interesting for people in the room is, what is the current state of play for financial services, FinTech, in sort of your region, and I guess some of the big trends that you're seeing? Would you like to kick off?
I can try and kick off for Finland.
Sure.
I would expect that there's some similarity across the Nordic countries, but we'll see. As a starting point, I would say Finland and the Nordics have a tradition of being very technology-oriented, but also quite savvy in financial services. We've had, we have very old financial institutions, but also we have had some of the first online banks in the late 90s. We've had mobile banks for a while, so quite tech-savvy, quite a tech-savvy consumer base. Households are very sort of receptive to digital services. We also have a great startup scene, and part of that is FinTech. FinTech is maybe not the largest group of startup companies, but it's a very, very skilled, very highly skilled and sort of ambitious group of companies, so it's very interesting, and it goes really across the whole range of financial services. And there's great cooperation also between different types of players. So I would say it's growing fast, but the tradition, there's a good base from where to start.
Yeah, you've just sort of sparked my mind to a conversation Thomas and I were having earlier before we came on stage about, and something I mentioned in my opening remarks about this, innovative startup culture. We spoke about design thinking, the amazing design, architecture, everything you see in your regions. Thomas, would you like to sort of talk
Sure.
to the scene that you're seeing at the moment and to some of those points, perhaps?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting time for FinTech in the Nordic region now. I think if you look at pretty much any rankings that are coming out of right now, and you look at how does the Nordic countries rank on being innovative, you would find one or two of the Nordic countries there, right? So it's really innovative solutions. It's built, like you said, on a digital infrastructure or backbone that is quite second to none. What we're struggling a little bit typically within the Nordics is actually scaling those solutions. So I think we will get back to that afterwards. But so what I think we experience now in the Nordics is that the local ecosystem is being built. We was established last year. We got the Finnish FinTech Farm. I think that was announced not so long ago. Stockholm FinTech Hub and Oslo also. And now the local systems are coming together, right? So now we formed this, 1 week ago, we formed this collaboration agreement where we kind of agree on, okay, so we brand the Nordics, we try to work on attracting capital, we work on joint projects and joint applications, and hopefully also in the future joint travels to Singapore.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this talk of collaboration, and excuse my ignorance, but I would love to actually know, you're all collaborating together really well. Like, as an Australian, we have this, battle between the Australians and the New Zealanders, and I know in Asia there's sometimes a little bit of competition between the markets of who is the leader, but you actually sound like your nations are more, like, you collaborate. Would that be true?
Yeah, I think, you know, at least I think what's common for the Nordics, sorry. What's common for the Nordics is that we tend to sit down and agree on what we disagree on. Or what we compete on and what we don't compete on. Okay. So I think what we really did here was have a good talk around, you know, so of course we compete in some areas, but there's also some areas where it just makes so much, so much sense to do something together, because we're all pretty small countries. And outside the Nordics, you know, everyone just want to know what's going on in the Nordics. It's not so often people come up to me and say, okay, Denmark specifically, but what is going on in the Nordics? Outside, right? And then we, of course, also compete.
Yeah, but I can add on that. I think the Nordic countries are very similar. And if you compare it to here, like if you have a fintech company working in Singapore, going to Indonesia or Malaysia is a very different game. Some of the basic like infrastructure issues that you would face in Indonesia, you wouldn't have faced here in Singapore, for instance. So it's not only the language or the culture, it's actually more fundamental than that. And if you scale from Sweden to Norway, it's actually not a very big deal. So I think there are those similarities. However, if you look into like the fintech scene or the fintech solutions that's out there, I see a lot of like very national services. So if you look into like the mobile payment, for instance, we have within Sweden, the four biggest banks, they are collaborating and have done so for many years, and now they've developed like Pay Now that you have here with a phone number, you can just transfer money, right? And that's for Sweden only. So if you as a Norwegian come to Sweden, you can actually not buy ice cream in my hometown because they feel it's too expensive with cash. They don't offer credit cards. They only offer Swish, which is this like mobile solution. And if you have a Norwegian number, you can't pay. And that's true whether or not you're from Germany, Norway, or Singapore. So those services are very national. And from a personal perspective, I think that's a little bit sad. The web was very global, and now like these initiatives that are driven by national banks or national governments even tend to be very local and national. And being a global citizen, jumping on having like 5 different SIM cards for every country I go to, I do run into issues every time. I cannot buy my diapers to my son when I'm in Mumbai because I don't have a whatever Indian bank account. So it's a little bit sad in that way.
Yeah. It's an interesting theme. In Australia, we have a bit of it's a similar thing. It's a bit strange, but in Sydney and Melbourne, which are, you know, an hour's flight apart, but it's literally all the same country. But, you know, your travel card to use any public transport is completely different. It's this huge arduous process to go through just to do anything. That's the same country. So I think we can see that themes in the world now are happening. It would be so good if you could do all of this all over the world. Iren, I'd love to ask your view on some of the big trends and themes that you're seeing, maybe in Oslo and then more broadly across the region. Yeah,
first, you know, to collaborate, that's in our DNA in the Nordics. And I believe that is 3 things that we see now that's important to know. That is the regulations, and it is the international giants moving into the Nordics because they see test beds there. And it's also the collaboration nature we have. And we have also a regulation in the Nordic that's very important to know. It's the PSD2. And that forces all the key players to open and stimulate to innovate. And that's towards the global giants. So, and we are used to do that. So that makes us work together, find arenas for it. And we also see that when the fintechs started in the Nordics, we saw that they were fighting towards the incumbents and vice versa. And now we see that they need each other. You know, the large bank, they have the data, they have the infra, they have the trust, they have the brand. And for us, you know, the consumers, we see that the fintechs, they had the customer-centric focus. So now they've found out that together they can really do good. And we see the banks in the Nordic now, they are really investing in the hubs, the labs, the clusters all over the Nordics. And there are investors, and it's really growing fast. And compared to EU, the Nordics, they've seen that the Nordic will be the next FinTech hub, as the same as we see in globally. It's not the US anymore. It's the ASEAN that will be the FinTech, the next FinTech hub. So it's very interesting.
Very exciting.
Yeah.
Look out. Lisa, did you have something to add there? Sorry.
No, I just had a quick comment regarding the banks, because I think similar to Singapore, there are a couple of big banks in Sweden, and it looks the same in the other Nordic countries, and they are now facing real competition from different fintech startups, starting to like eat different pieces of their like core business. So of course they are a little bit stressed. So what we see now in the Nordics, or at least in Sweden, is that not only do they invest in amazing like fintech hubs and co-working spaces and accelerators, they also do a lot of corporate investments directly into startups. So this, for the past couple of years, they've actually been a little bit in the media. They've been a little bit accused of like hyping and kind of overvaluating fintech startups in Sweden, because they come with their corporate VC, which is a big trend we see across the world, I would say, with startups. They actually do kind of tend to increase the valuations a little bit. I think that's kind of settled now, but there is a lot of money from the big banks going directly into the startups, which, of course, for them and for anyone makes a lot of sense.
But I also would like to say, Chloe, when we have been spearheads in the Nordic, we have H&M. They changed the logistic and how you do, clothing. And we have IKEA, we have Spotify. There's been a big game changer when it comes to music. And I think I could just continue. So this is, again, we're always fast in moving because of the technology and adoption.
Yeah, some great examples, and I love some great examples outside of financial services as well. Thomas, did you?
Yeah, I think it also the collaboration is maturing a bit, right? Because there was, to be honest, there was also a little bit of innovation circus in it. So there's a little bit of marketing, and everyone wants to do something with startups, and there's always corporates willing to talk to startups, and I think it's moved on to being a little bit more mature, and now when there's talks and collaborations, it's actual collaborations with the objective to bring actual solutions to market. So we're going from being curious to actually doing stuff, and also I think we moved at least a bit further from just having an appetite for talking, and now we need to build capabilities to actually take it further and bring yet more solutions to market.
Yeah. Aleksi?
I think it comes back to scaling. We've seen the same sort of phenomenon in other tech sectors, like gaming and then health tech. So what we saw there earlier was that initially there was a lot of activity in the different Nordic countries, a lot of activity within just small companies. And then at some point we realized if we want to scale these industries and be a bit more ambitious, there's no point in doing it in 4 different or 5 different countries separately. And they started to collaborate much more amongst them together. And I think we're now seeing the exact same thing happening with FinTech. First in the countries themselves, there's a lot of cooperation, but then across the Nordics as well. So yeah, I think there's a pattern there.
That's great. I love it when the question that comes in on Pigeonhole is the next question on my notes. So that's brilliant. I'm going to go to Pigeonhole if we can have that up on the screen if it's okay. So Sweden is well known as one of the most cashless economies in the world. What was the secret, and did the government play a big role in driving change? And actually my note there was talking about cash usage across the Nordic region actually, and quite similar to Asia in fact. And do you think that has promoted the growth of FinTech into other areas other than payments? Would you like to start on that one, Lisa?
Sure. So that's definitely true. Just a fun story. I think it was last summer they exchanged the bills to a new bill. Although none of my friends have ever seen them because we just never use them. And I might not be in Sweden so often, but my friends are definitely there. So it's true, we do not use cash. Of course, some people do. I think like in 5 to 7 years, it's kind of predicted to be no more cash in Sweden. And I think iSettle, which is one of our like fintech stars in Sweden, they were early on. It's like a Square equivalent. So they let merchants. You could just pay merchants, small merchants, because they were targeting SMEs. Then came this collaboration called Swish, where you just pay with your mobile phone. They also have a merchant version, just like GrabPay now is rolling out in Singapore. And that's really, there is no need for cash. And people also, I know that the retail kind of association, they've also been doing a lot of communication around actually the real cost of cash. That it's not, if you compare it to credit cards as a merchant, you might think that it's easier and cheaper for me to take cash. Well, as long as you're not doing anything illegal, it's actually not, because cash also has a cost. So I think that's been it's been an education of that as well. So yeah, if you go to the church or wherever and you leave money, you do that with a text. Yeah.
Wow, yeah.
And to be honest, if you go across the Nordic countries, it's the same. I think Sweden has been very vocal about this trend, but I think it's very, very similar in other Nordic countries as well, especially Finland including. And I think it's not so much necessarily driven by the central banks or the government. It's really the consumers and the people. Just that's how they like to do things. It's sort of driven more by the demand side.
And I guess head of digital at a bank, you were probably the next person I was going to talk to about that.
True,
what's your view there?
So official view. Well, I suppose I'm the only one who's actually works for an institution that has cash as the consumer product, but it's probably not going to go completely away. But I think, as I said, we'll see what people want. I think that's. I've also talked to the other central banks in the Nordics, and I think again it's driven by households, driven by the people, and we'll see what they want. If they want to go all digital, then Sweden at least has been very vocal about if they want to go all digital, then we'll go all digital. It's not a big deal necessarily, and I mean cash is quite an old product. It's the only financial product that's probably still not digitized. And Finland is, of course, special in the sense that we have the euro. So it's slightly different for us in the sense that if Finland goes cashless, it doesn't mean that the euro banknotes will disappear. If Sweden or Norway goes cashless, then we'll no longer have Swedish krona banknotes. And that's a slight difference there. But I think it's largely driven by the people, like what they want. That's what will go.
Irene?
Yeah, and I also think that we have 5 countries in the Nordic. We have Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, and Iceland. And like in Norway, we are specialists in authentication and security. And in Sweden, it's with payment. We have the ground jewels like Klarna and iSettle. And then I see Denmark in front of blockchain. And Finland, we have PFM. And we have e-invoicing and electric banking for SMEs. And if we look to Iceland, we have PFM. So we are fast adapters, and we are moving to the new technology. And we have like devices, 3-4 devices each of us, and we have a fantastic internet and infrastructure. Yeah. So that's important for us also to bring out to the world and build bridges so we can be this test bed.
Yeah. I mean, I think the cash, the topic of cash, I always find so interesting. I try and go to countries and see how far I can get without using cash, just as like a bit of a, I don't know, it sounds like quite a nerdy game, doesn't it? But I quite like it. But I've been around the world recently and done that, and it's kind of worked quite well. In saying that, Australia has just designed a whole bunch of new notes, as in brand new designs. So the RBA is obviously putting sort of, some attention to that.
Yeah, it's. I think that's also a very Nordic thing, because at least in Denmark, there's also a talk about, okay, so now we still got like 5 or 10% still using cash. So what do we do? How do we actually include these guys also? Whether it's the older generation or whatever that cannot use these digital solutions, maybe. So there is actually also an ongoing discussion around how do we onboard the last one? What kind of solutions do we offer so the last 5-10% get on board?
And I have to tell you that I had a dinner with our largest bank in Norway last night, and they were showing me biometrics. And it was really, really fantastic. And also Telenor, how they're doing, the mobile focus over here it's, leapfrogging from nothing, and they just go right through their mobiles. So we are also, what we're doing back home and been doing for a long time, we can bring over here.
Yeah, I think we could talk for hours about biometrics and AI. It's a huge one. I want to move on to partnerships, because we were talking a lot about partnerships between fintechs, traditional organisations. I think it's so relevant hopefully to people in the audience. Thomas, I wanted to begin with you and ask you about how Copenhagen FinTech, how you see the current collaboration between a lot of the people that you're working with and some of the bigger organisations. Is there a lot happening? Can more be done? What's the scene like?
I think there's definitely a lot happening, and as I said before, we're moving on. We're maturing the kind of the dialogue, moving from just being very interested to actually doing real collaborations and bringing things to the market. As you said, also there's some investment. So we see more of the corporate venture capital coming in, also investing in the fintechs now. Strategic partnerships. and trying to source some of these typical solutions or technologies that the corporates has a little bit hard on handling. So that could be, I think a good example of that would be in the Nordics, it would be Nets. That's one of the big Nordic payment companies.
Say the name again.
Nets.
Okay,
There's actually one in
it's just
Singapore. Yeah, it's not the same. It's actually both are called Nets, and I think both of them have something to do with payments, but it's not the same.
Ooh, who's
that's
done the copyright on the name?
It is. Yeah, it's quite funny, but. And this company partner up with a company called Chainalysis doing fraud detection on a Bitcoin blockchain, right? Yeah. So that's a perfect marriage between these two guys. So I think we're seeing a lot more of that. And I think if we look at the lab, the Copenhagen FinTech lab, at least the numbers I have from there is that around 50% of the startups sitting there is already collaborating with a corporate partner. And I think around 80% of them is kind of collaborating overall or want to collaborate with a established bank, right? So many of these guys are standing on the back of a more established partner. So there's a lot of things going on. The dialogue is maturing. So it's quite exciting times.
It's broadening out. I want to jump to Pigeonhole again because there's a where did it go? Oh yeah, right. Okay, so. And I'm going to jump to you, Lisa, because it kind of relates to that question about partnerships a little bit. Are there similarities in the fintech scene and partnerships between Singapore and the Nordic countries? So what are you seeing, I guess just obviously so relevant for people in the room here in this market, and then what you see back at home, even though you have a few homes at the moment?
So I think there are, if I talk about the differences first, so here we see a lot of great initiatives coming from like MAS and like the government, and they've put up a sandbox for startups to literally test their product in. They do run a lot of different initiatives and kind of push innovation and kind of push the development, whereas you wouldn't see at least not the Swedish government. I don't think you would see any of the other Nordic governments like pushing that hard. What you do see, like other organizations, like Thomas is representing, where the government has a stake, but it's not fully like run by the government, but it's rather like a collaboration between different parties. So that's a little bit how it's different. I think when it comes to the interest for fintech and the interest for startups, that's very similar. It's when you speak to anyone like in a big organization, insurance or banking or anything like that, everyone knows that they have to do something in digital, and everyone is looking to two different startups, and that kind of mature, if you're, can you say that, or that kind of realization is the same here as it in, I would say, among the bigger companies in Sweden and probably Nordics.
It shows you the power of government, right? I think in Singapore particularly. I mean, here we are at the MAS conference, so obviously all not in the room at the moment, but 25,000 people have attended this event over the 3 days. So for government and I guess the regulatory body to get behind this scene, it's huge, right? It's huge in the area. Aleksi, I want to come to you a little bit on your view, as my question to Thomas was about how you're seeing partnership working from, from a bank's perspective, and maybe some people that you're partnering with or that you're looking at, if you can reveal.
Yeah, sure. So I think partnership is important both if you think in terms of small companies and big companies, or incumbents and new entrants, but also private institutions and public institutions. I think there's sort of cooperation in all of these dimensions, and it's all important. And I think, are the Nordics similar to Singapore? Yes, absolutely. That's why we are here, and we are here to learn, and vice versa. So, as a central bank, we've been trying to act as a kind of neutral, objective platform, and I think we do a lot of the same things as MAS here in Singapore, and trying to learn from them. I think, in many ways, MAS is a kind of a template on how to do the, how to build cooperation, how to kind of drive innovation for the whole sector, and being a sort of central hub, for discussions, for knowledge exchange, and we're trying to do the very similar thing in Finland. And I think the parties, all the companies, they feel we are kind of neutral. We are sort of a good central sort of place to engage with other companies and also with the public sector. So I think we have a role to play in that sense.
Absolutely. I mean, we see central banks and regulators, ASIC in Australia, FCA in the UK, and obviously your area, MAS, like getting so much more involved in this conversation. And exactly, it brings everyone together. We see all the sandboxes and all the work that's happening, which is exciting. And to your point, Lisa, about global, a global citizen, it sort of draws everyone in. And I'm sure that these conversations will happen at Davos next year, etc. Irene?
Yeah, and I also think it's very interesting because in the Nordic we are kind of slow, but we started early. We had the online bank already back in 1996, and that's why when we now we kind of homogeneous market and we are mature and we are early adopters, and then we see Asia, and it's so fast, so smart and agile. So for us, we are on the same level, but we kind of started earlier. Yep. So that's why to go together with Asia now is fantastic for us, because I think we are in the same position. Yeah,
and scaling-wise, they can really help. Yeah.
I think Irene actually hit the nail on the head. I think that's exactly the thinking in the Nordics, is that we had all the elements, we have all the pieces. Yeah. Just like Thomas said, we have the infrastructure. We are digital. We're sort of digitally native countries in that sense, and we have also the financial companies. We have traditions. So why are we seeing other countries kind of moving much faster, much further ahead? And I think Asia and Singapore are really the places where things are happening. That's what we're here to learn about.
Yes, I mean, some excellent learnings there. I'm going to come on to education and financial literacy here. As I said, I love it when the questions that come in from here match mine. It means I've prepared well. But anyway, one of the questions that has come in from Nick. The Nordics are well known for their world-leading education systems. Is financial literacy a key part of that system, and do you think that will drive high levels of fintech adoption by consumers? Now, the panel and I had a conversation about financial literacy before we prepared for today. And Aleksi, you had some interesting views here, and I wanted, adding to Nick's question there, I wanted to add a quote from Aleksi. It said, "It seems that with so much innovation in finance, consumers can easily get confused about new services and technologies. We want to make sure that the general public has the basic skills needed for managing personal finances and doesn't fall behind in literacy." So let's have a little bit of a conversation about financial literacy and how it plays out across the Nordic region, and perhaps how more can be done. Would you like to begin?
Yeah, this is actually one of my favorite topics, and it's you have to strike a balance between sort of innovation and looking after that you don't leave anyone behind. So we want both for there to be new services and a lot of new innovative services, but at the same time, it's the early adopters that are usually the ones who use them, and many of the success stories come from quite a small part of the population. And I think in Nordics we have also a tradition of looking after the entire population, making sure that financial services are there for everyone. And you can't really blame the fintech companies. They're supposed to serve a certain customer segment, and that's absolutely fine. And it's great to have a lot of innovation. But then, as a public authority, then we are trying to make sure that the general public also benefits from all the innovation, and that nobody gets left behind.
Yeah, absolutely. Somebody else like to jump onto the financial literacy? I might start with you, Lisa. What's your view there?
I agree that Finland is great when it comes to education. I wouldn't say that Sweden is doing as well, and especially being here in Singapore, I know that Singapore is probably world leading when it comes to education. So I'm a little bit more like, I'm not sure if I agree on that statement. And having a child, I'm considering putting him in school here in Singapore instead. If people should go to school, who knows? The future is happening so fast. Anyway, that's a sidetrack. We can take that later. But I wouldn't also necessarily agree that the financial literacy is so high if you compare to like living in, compared to other parts of the world. But what I do think is happening is that the network effect is very big, because it's kind of small communities in Sweden, and especially in Sweden, it's like, and we are all like small countries. Yeah. So when some people starting using like mobile payments, they kind of get their aunt to get on there, and then their aunt get their cousin to get on there, and then all of a sudden you have the entire country within a few days, just because it's the network effect of it. So I think those are some of the things that are playing in, and then of course the government and some of the bigger banks are pushing. You file your taxes in Sweden with a text message. That is not a case when you file your taxes in the US. Singapore is actually pretty good in that sense as well. You have your SingPass, and then you can like file your things. But yeah, so I think there is a push from governments and big companies, but the education level is amazing here in Singapore, which I'm a bit impressed about.
Yeah, very true. Thomas?
Yeah, I think what's interesting is that there is actually reports coming out, and I think that's what you're pointed towards also, that especially the younger generation are really they're lacking the basic skills or insights to manage their own financials. So I think maybe a little bit fueled also by PSD2 and the open banking, there will be a second way of like kind of innovation that will speak to this and will try to solve that problem, that will provide new services, new solutions together with the banks that will actually teach this generation to handle their financials, right? So that's one thing, and it's at the same time I think the Nordics with their reputation, again going back to the whole thing around design thinking and human-centric design, that provides us with a huge opportunity to actually take care of that problem on a global scale. So scaling some of these solutions, and just last week we were in India, and one or two of the companies are actually working in that space in actually educating people about their finances. So it's also a huge opportunity for the Nordics to work in that space.
Yeah, I mean, it's just made me think of something else. We're also talking about some of the most livable places in the world, right? All of your countries actually are always very high up on that list, most livable cities, but expensive. High cost of living, different way, a different style. So I think the literacy piece is important because people need good finances. They need them to last for a long time. But
I think maybe it is very equal. So there is maybe the top and the elite in some countries are way ahead, but in Sweden no one is falling too far behind.
Yeah. So. Okay, Iren, did you want to add anything on to that financial literacy piece from where you sit? Because you sit on a number of boards and councils. I know you probably look at this more broadly.
Been all said. Yeah, I think they're doing good.
Okay, well, I think we'll go on to some areas to watch then. Areas, the big what's next. We've got about 12 minutes, 50 seconds to go. So that's quite approximate, actually. It's quite detailed. But let's talk about areas to watch and areas that are ripe for disruption. All the buzzwords: RegTech, InsurTech, everything else tech. Let's kick off there as some big areas that you think are ripe for disruption across the Nordic region. Who wants to take that first? Thomas?
Yeah. I think what we see, at least in Denmark, and I think it can also be seen in some of the other countries, is that the insurance space is starting to catch on. So the banks were first in line when it came to this wave of disruption, but now the insurance companies are slowly waking up, and we start to see innovation coming out there also. I think the whole regulatory and compliance space, that's really interesting now. So there's a lot of things happening now, trying to apply AI, that's very broad, but just in AI or blockchain in some of these solutions. And also the whole cybersecurity issue is also, so I think that we're going to see a huge boom in that. And in an area where Denmark is actually not that strong, but we really want to explore that space also, so because that's extremely important. I don't need to tell you guys that, but so I think that's kind of what we see from my perspective.
Something to watch, Iren?
Yeah, I don't think we see. We are not talking about small classes here. We are talking about industries, because I see the FinTechs now. They are all over the place, and that's what I think. The next sector that will be disrupted is the retailers. Because the way we see the networks now, the global, like Amazon, how we are working. I'm sorry. Like we see that they have in US, Amazon Prime has 52% market share, and they offer free shipping of goods and whatever we want. They are the largest online shopping mall, and and they are also very focused on the sharing economy, and I think the network orchestrators that really is going to be the most important thing we see in the future. And also it's like in banking, it's not about banks anymore. It's about banking, and for them to be a part of this global network platform. It's a platform economy we're talking about.
Absolutely. I love that you've brought up the sharing economy. I jumped into a taxi with 2 people yesterday because I was running late, so it's my version of a sharing economy. I'm going to go to a question again on Pigeonhole, just because there's 4 votes on this one from PG. Sweden has also started using technologies like blockchain in governance, making land records decentralised. How do you see the future of such technology in good governance? Would anybody like to talk about blockchain?
I always have an opinion about blockchain.
Other than me? Go.
So my only question is, okay, so they put the land registry on a blockchain. So how is that different from putting it on a database? That's sort of my question. So I think there are some good use cases for blockchain. It's not maybe going to change the world, but just putting things on a database is maybe not one of them. I think it has more to do with what's happening, for example, in securities post-trade settlement, for example. When you have complex transactions and you have lots of different parties, I think there's a case for some kind of decentralized solution. But yeah, I think in general, e-government is also quite big, and it's closely related to FinTech, and you see a lot of that happening in the Nordics as well. I mean, we probably have a lot of stuff on public registries, and digitized a lot of the sort of basic assets that you need in financial markets.
Absolutely. Lisa, do you want to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I disagree that it wouldn't change the world. I think it will, and I think that every company and organization now has to kind of look into and do a forecast of the future. What will happen to us in 5 to 10 years when it comes to blockchain, and how is that actually going to impact our big business? Because I do think it will impact most of the business across the board, not only in financial services, but all of them. So I think we do see the foundation of a new infrastructure being laid, and now everyone is going to use that in one way or another. And I do think that maybe some of the borders that has been strong in the past will no longer. It's going to be hard for the regulations to follow, because now things that Sweden cannot decide things, right? If you put things on a blockchain instead, and who's owning what, if you have a contract with multiple citizens from multiple countries, but then it's all on the blockchain. It's going to be messy, but I do think it's going to change the world.
Okay, Thomas, yeah.
Yeah, I think what we see now is also that the Nordics is quite conservative, and blockchain is a new technology, and in some ways it's also very immature. But I think what we're starting to see now is actual use cases. For example, within identity. We have one of the startups coming here, New Banking, is working within that space, KYC, and doing a proof of concept now with Nordie. We have another startup getting funding also, Hive Online, that's working with the blockchain. So I think we're seeing actually stuff being done and being backed, and the proof of concepts being worked on. So maybe it took a little bit longer time, and maybe. But yeah, now it's about to happen now. So I think that's also a very Nordic kind of, maybe not the first, but once we get there, we kind of do real stuff.
Let's have this same panel next year and have that question again and see what's happened.
Yeah,
I would add anything, Iren?
Yeah, I would just like to say we were going to see a lot of common projects, I think, in the Nordics when it comes to blockchain. And as I said, Denmark has been doing a lot, and I know it's big interesting for all the incumbents because everyone that we are not quite sure what it would do for us, but we all know it will be there. And then we also said we're too small to do projects on it by ourselves. So this is some of the question in NFI. We have 100 members and 150,000 employees within the members. And this is something we are talking about. Can we do it in a Bluemix garage like IBM has? So we are finding meeting places and arena for doing this all together. I think that's good.
Fantastic. Look, we've got a few minutes to go. So nice when you see your panelists all with their microphones ready to speak. It makes my life very easy. We all thought we were going to run out of things to say. We haven't. I just want to talk to the panel a little bit about where else in the world do you look? Where do you look for amazing examples of innovation? I don't even mind if you talk about away from FinTech or financial services. What are some really cool, innovative things that you're seeing around the world, like markets to watch? Maybe they're your own markets. Aleksi, I'm going to start with you. Sorry.
I couldn't think of any one place. I think it's worthwhile looking really everywhere, and I think that's one of the great benefits I've got out of this particular conference, seeing what's happening in Asia, in Africa, and Latin America. Super interesting things related to financial inclusion. All sorts of different things. I think it just makes a lot of sense to look all around the world.
Yeah, I think it's interesting the places that you've just mentioned. With these just huge populations and the availability to scale, it's amazing, isn't it? And I guess from maybe some smaller nations, that's quite interesting to see, like how quickly something can just explode.
Yeah, and actually I'll just add one more thing. Rather than maybe a region, one of the things I've got out of this conference is a sort of segment, and that's sort of the unbanked and and also on the business side, the small and medium-sized businesses. I think there's a lot of very interesting things happening in that segment.
Yeah, I love that. Thomas?
Yeah, I think it also depends a little bit on what we're looking for, right? So when we talk about cybersecurity, I would definitely look towards Israel and Tel Aviv to get a little bit more insights on that. The AI space, maybe Canada. There's a lot of stuff going on there, and next year hopefully we will explore a little bit about China also, because it's crazy what's going on there with the Alipay and how fast the market is moving there. So there's a lot of different spots around the world where things are happening. So I think it's also one of the trends, right? It's going from when we started out just a year ago, we talked about the Nordics. Then we started talking about Europe, and now it's just this is a global movement. So yeah, I think that's a learning point from us, or my perspective also. But this is a global movement.
It's fantastic, isn't it? It means we get to travel all the time. I love it. Irene?
I definitely would say, because when we started NFI 2016, we looked into the US, Silicon Valley and New York, and then we decided that now in 2017 we have to go to the global leader, and it's for us definitely Asia. And Alibaba, they are all, Alipay now is in Helsinki, it's in Norway, and was sort of telling about the big platform. So for us in Nordic Finance Innovation, we think that Asia now is the leader, and also the way we can see we are kind of like, as I said. So for us, it's very. I have a group already. I have a group now with me, and it's impressing what the Asian market is doing so fast, and I would say so smart and so agile. That's what I really learned about this market. I love being here.
Yeah, I mean, Jack Ma was onto something, wasn't he? I think the numbers I interviewed Rita Liu from Alipay in Copenhagen, actually, at Money 2020, and just some of her numbers, I can't remember them, but my God, like millions. And I'm coming from a country of 24 million. I was like, okay, you're quite huge. Lisa, would you like to add?
No, I could just say that, of course, Silicon Valley is where a lot of the innovation will continue to happen. However, we decided to move away from there like 2.5 years ago and to come to this region instead. It's because we believe that the future is here. And we also see like a lot of, it's funny because you see all these Silicon Valley companies, Facebook has a little internal team. Every morning their task is to like look at all the new developments in WeChat and kind of report that back into the team, right? So you see all the big giants in Silicon Valley copying China, which we saw already when we lived there like 2.5 years ago. So obviously China is going to be leading, and it's just by pure numbers. But having now commuting to Mumbai and had the opportunity to work a lot in India as well, of course, that's a huge country. They have the Aadhaar, where a lot of companies build like services on top of it. So I do think India, China, Southeast Asia, this is like the place to be in the middle.
Yeah, fantastic. I think I mentioned to you all, I interviewed Stanislav Sikora from City Handlove yesterday on the Deloitte stage, and he said Estonia as another market to watch. So it was just interesting to hear all these things. I think these are the things you take away from a conference like this and go, oh, I'm going to look that up and see what I can learn. So that's fantastic. We've got to close out. I'm going to throw you all a curveball that you don't know about, but just to close the session today. And thank you so much for all joining us. I've loved this conversation. You all speak so passionately about what you do, and I just would like to ask you all, why do you do what you do, and what sort of drives and inspires you? Why do you love it? Love working in the fintech space? Lisa?
Okay, I can start. Actually, my background when I started working was as a theater producer, and seeing an idea being brought up to life on stage is like the best feeling in the world. And working with startups is just the same thing. Someone, or maybe yourself, you have an idea, and then you brought that out to millions and millions of users launching that, and that's incredible. And you're actually changing the everyday life. So that's why.
Fantastic, Thomas.
Yeah, so I think what really drives me is I've been in huge financial corporates for like 20, 25 years, and I think right now this is undergoing massive change, right? So it's the most exciting times to be in financial services right now, because this is moving away from talking about financial services as a vertical. To being something that underpins every industry, whatever, as business models changes, as with solutions come out, it's just something that's part of everything we do. So it's also changing from being I'm in the financial service industry to something else, and no one really. I think there's a lot of people giving answers to where they think they're going, but no one really knows where this ends. Right, coming back to Europe with Amazon or FinTechs or corporates, who's going to be the platform, who's going to be the app, and. Blah, blah, blah. So there's a lot of interesting questions that will be answered during the next, 3-5 years.
And that's that curiosity piece that you said you love, the curiosity of what you do. Irene, for you?
We are going from product-oriented to customer-focused. I'm born with this financial industry, and for me it's all about sharing economy, platform economy. It's about collaboration and co-creation, and the world is flat. So it's all about how we can work together, all of us.
Thank you. Aleksi, for you?
Yeah, what I love about the financial industry and financial innovation is that you can look both back in history, hundreds of years and thousands of years, and see really, really interesting stuff there. But then you can also try to look into the future another 100 years or so. And you have that whole time scale, and there's just a lot of happening on that time scale. So there's a looking back and at the same time looking forward.
It's a good place to be. I guess what I love is like the last hour that I had. I loved that. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. Please join me in thanking the panel.
Thank you.